Thank you for joining. The program will begin momentarily. Thank you for joining, everyone. The program will begin momentarily. Thank you for joining. The program will begin momentarily. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Paycheck Protection Stimulus Bill Virtual Town Hall, presented by NMSDC and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Attendees have been muted and will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the program. If you have any questions for our speakers during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A box in your Zoom controls to ensure that our panel sees them, and our moderators will address them during the designated Q&A periods. The chat box should only be used for troubleshooting technical issues, administrative support, or other general chatter. Again, please use the Q&A box for questions for our speakers. Today's session will be live streamed and recorded. Finally, be sure to stay tuned to the end of the session to learn about other upcoming events designed to develop, connect, and advocate for minority businesses and the corporations that support them. And now, please welcome the President and CEO of NMSDC, Adrienne Trimble, to kick off this afternoon's program. Adrienne?
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those that are in a different time zone, and wishing you all a very happy new year. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you I've not had the opportunity to meet, again, I'm Adrienne Trimble, President and CEO of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. A quick word of introduction, just in case you're not familiar with our organization. We are the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the leading minority business development organization in the United States. Since being chartered in 1972, NMSDC has supported the economic sustainability of certified minority business enterprises, or as we call them, MBEs, and we've advanced the supplier diversity mission by facilitating procurement opportunities between our certified MBEs and our corporate members. While we're still focusing on the value and importance of supplier diversity, we've recently expanded and broadened our thinking to encompass the bigger picture of economic inclusion of minority businesses in corporate America and our US economy. We get our work done through the NMSDC network, which includes a national office that's based in New York, along with 23 affiliate councils throughout the country and 5 international partner organizations. We appreciate your participation in today's important town hall as we partner with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to discuss the next round of funding through the Paycheck Protection Program and gain a better understanding of how to prepare for this round of stimulus funding and what can be done to improve access to funding for minority businesses. We will cover the policy for PPP as we know it today, and there will be a panel discussion with bankers and other financial institutions that are familiar with the PPP application process, designed to share information and answer questions to assist MBEs with securing a PPP loan. NMSDC is more committed than ever to continuing our mission and finding new ways to support the minority business community. And we're making every effort to be responsive to our constituents' needs and provide programs, services, and resources that help you remain innovative, competitive, and sustainable. Joining us today are Rick C. Wade, Senior Vice President of the Strategic Alliances and Outreach for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Carlton O'Neill, President, Lightspeed EDU, Inc., and the newly elected National MBE Input Committee Chair, Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Henry Childs II, who is the chair of the NMSDC Business Consortium Fund and special advisor to the NMSDC president, Chris Hollins, the managing director for GM Cash Management and Chase Business Banking at JP Morgan Chase & Company, Dominique Millarton, president and CEO of Optus Bank, as well as Cara Wallace, president, MBE Capital Partners. I would like to take this time to thank each of you for standing up this forum so quickly and for agreeing to participate as moderators and panelists. And now, before we begin today's virtual town hall on the new Paycheck Protection Program, let me formally introduce my co-host and moderator, Rick C. Wade, Senior Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Outreach for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Rick develops and implements programs and initiatives to help the Chamber create new business relationships and partnerships across diverse audiences. He also provides counsel on policy issues and leads special projects. His wealth of knowledge and experience in both the public and private sectors enable him to give a megaphone to the voice of business across the country and share positive impacts of the free enterprise system. Before joining the Chamber, Rick was principal of the Wade Group, a strategic communications and global business development firm. Previously, he was a senior advisor and deputy chief of staff to former Secretary of Commerce, Gary Lockheed. He was a member of the White House task forces on Puerto Rico, small business contracting, automobile recovery, military families, and historically Black colleges and universities. He served on former Vice President Joe Biden's task force on middle-class America, and he worked with the White House on implementing the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. He was a senior advisor to the 2008 Obama for America campaign. Rick received his BS from the University of South Carolina and an MPA from Harvard University. And with that, I turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Rick Wade.
Adrian, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's always good to be with you and our partner organization, NMSDC. Nothing more important than the conversation that we're having right now. We know that there are some 8 million or more minority-owned enterprises across America. And we know that these businesses are not just job creators, but they're very important anchors in our communities. They are important fabric of our economy. But we know that minority businesses historically have had unique challenges with regards to access to capital and supplier diversity and so many others. And we're looking forward to taking those issues head on with NMSDC under your leadership. This conversation today is timely and urgent. Of the minority businesses across America, a U.S. Chamber of Commerce survey with our partner company MetLife shows that some 66% of minority-owned enterprises in America are concerned about permanently closing as a result of the impact of COVID-19 and our downturned economy. We have to solve for that. And one of the solutions that the U.S. Chamber has leaned in on and led on is working with Congress and working with the administration to make sure that in this new stimulus bill, in the new PPP funding and other tools, that minority businesses are not excluded, but included as we engage in an economic recovery. I'm excited to have my colleague from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Neil Bradley, joining me in a dialogue about PPP and the stimulus bill. Neil Bradley is the Chief Policy Officer and Executive Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Neil, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule on this very, very important day in America's history to have a conversation with these very important enterprises. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Rick. It's a pleasure to join you and our colleagues there and talk about some of these important benefits that are available to small businesses. There's lots going on, obviously, in the world today and in our country, but for small businesses, being able to understand some of these lifelines that Congress has provided is really going to be, for many, the make or break for surviving the next few months. So it's our pleasure to join with everyone here today and talk about some of those.
Well, why don't we start off? Let's jump right in and allow you to give an overview of what's currently in the stimulus bill with regards to support for minority and small businesses in America.
That's fantastic. And I believe we've just pulled up a slide here because I really want to focus on two aspects of this new law that really could be beneficial for small businesses. I know we're here to talk about the PPP, and I want to get to the second draw PPP and the original PPP in a second, but I want to focus people's attentions first on the employee retention tax credit. This was something that was actually initially created in the original CARES Act last summer, but it didn't get a lot of attention and didn't get a lot of pickup on the part of businesses, in part because of some of the restrictions that were included in that original law. The chief restriction, for example, was that if you took a PPP loan, you also couldn't take advantage of the employee retention tax credit. And because PPP loans were so much larger and more advantageous, most businesses simply went to the PPP program. Congress has now repealed that restriction. You can take advantage of both the PPP loan program and the employee retention tax credit. They've also made the tax credit more generous. Beginning January 1st of this year through the first 2 quarters, calendar quarters of 2021, the tax credit provides a 70% credit on the first $10,000 of wages per employee. Doesn't take long math to realize that's $14,000 per employee. This is really important because it's not just a normal tax credit that you get when you file your annual tax returns. This is an advanceable, refundable credit, and it's against the payroll taxes that you as an employer withhold and then remit to the US Treasury. And so you can get this money almost immediately. If you qualify for a tax credit that is larger than those payroll taxes that you remit, the IRS sends you a check. And if you have cash flow problems, you can actually go to the IRS and get an advance on this. So who qualifies for this? Generally, it's businesses with 500 or fewer employees, and they have to meet this revenue decline threshold. You have to certify and demonstrate that you've had more than a 20% decline in gross receipts in a quarter compared to the same quarter in 2019. So if your business is off by more than 20% relative to what it was in 2019, you qualify for this tax credit on a per employee basis. If this is something that you think you may qualify for, I'd also urge you to look back at 2019. One of the other changes that was included in the last law was the ability to look back and collect this tax credit. It's less generous. It's only a $5,000 tax credit per employee for 2019. And generally, you have to have fewer than 100 employees. But if you have fewer than 100 employees, you should look back, talk to your tax preparer, your accountant, the folks who do your books to make sure that you don't miss on this opportunity. Let's turn to the second draw PPP loans. So when Congress created the PPP program, which we're all now very familiar with, it was really a forgivable loan program that was broadly available, designed to help small businesses keep employees on their payroll. Most small businesses who got a PPP loan have now long since exhausted those funds. And so one of the things Congress has done is created the second draw PPP program. The contours are essentially the same. It is a loan that is based on your 2.5 months of your payroll costs. It's forgivable if you spend the money on allowed expenses, including expending 60% on payroll costs for your employees. The loan's a little bit smaller this time. The maximum loan is now $2 million rather than $10 million. And there are tighter restrictions on who can qualify for the loan. It used to be businesses with fewer than 500 employees. That's been reduced to 300 employees. You have to have exhausted your original PPP, and you have to demonstrate that you've had a 25% or more decline in receipts in a quarter of 2020 compared to the same quarter in 2019. So a little bit more targeted, but still a really valuable tool to help small businesses who continue to suffer as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions to manage the next few months. I should also mention, by the way, that in addition, the original PPP program is being reopened. So if you didn't get an original PPP loan, there is an opportunity to now go see your lender and apply for one of those original PPPs. It doesn't have those same restrictions in terms of 300. It goes back to 500. Doesn't have the 25% loss restriction, but the loan will be limited to $2 million this time. And I should also mention that similar to the program this summer, there are set-asides for lending institutions who generally serve minority-owned small businesses. There's about a $15 billion set aside for community development financial institutions, a $15 billion set aside for small banks and credit unions, and there's going to be a set aside of about $30 billion that's targeted to micro businesses, fewer than 10 employees, who are taking a smaller loan, who happen to be located in a CRA tract that is low or moderate income.
Neil, thank you very much for that overview. As you can appreciate, we have lots of questions, and they're very good questions. But let me start off by asking you to share again, what is the intent? What was the intent, and what is the intent today of these programs?
Yeah, so with the PPP program, the intent is really to help small businesses keep their employees on the payroll. So the whole program is designed around your payroll costs. So there was lots of consternation. A lot of small businesses, you got a lot of other fixed costs, right? You got rent and you got utilities and you may have supplier costs. And so in some instances, you can use some of the proceeds for those expenses, but it's supposed to be a minority of your costs, meaning the bulk of your expenditures are supposed to be for keeping your employees on your payroll. So this was a way that Congress decided to try to help small businesses keep their employees. The employee retention tax credit operates the same way, hence the name employee retention. But one of the neat things about it is if you're incurring that, let's say you're a small business, you're incurring the cost of keeping your employees on the payroll, but you have all these other costs, right? You now essentially get to have from the government money back to offset part of those payroll costs, which you can use for anything else. You can use that for your supply chain needs. You can use that for other fixed costs that you have. You could use that for debt that you have. And so there are lots of ways here that you can take advantage of these programs. One other one that is worth mentioning as well is the economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL loans. For any business who's been in a situation with a natural disaster before, a hurricane, a flood, a wildfire, you may be familiar with this program. It was opened up as part of the original CARES Act for small businesses impacted by the pandemic. And importantly, one of the things that was done was there was a $10,000 grant that you could apply for, and you just got the direct grant. That program quickly exhausted its funds. Congress has now replenished that. So there's another $20 billion, but this time they've targeted that money. These funds are targeted to small businesses that have 300 and fewer employees that are located in low-income areas. If you're familiar with the New Market Tax Credit Program and the census tracts that are available for that tax credit, and if you're not, by the way, just Google New Market Tax Credits map, and you can get a map of the country and see if you're located in it. The program will be targeted to those employers in those census tracts. And that's just a free $10,000 that'll come from the SBA. Now, I know lots of folks are wondering when these programs are going to come online. The programs that we've talked about, the PPP original, PPP second draw, this EIDL grant program, those all are reliant on the SBA. And we expect maybe even today that the SBA will issue some guidance on these programs and open up the portals for lending. Remember, for a PPP loan, first or second loan, you go to your lender. For an EIDL grant or an EIDL loan, you go straight to the SBA. For the employee retention tax credit, you're going to the IRS, and you can do that right now, if you're a small business that qualifies.
Well, you talk about IRS sending a check back. That's very rare, and that's very inspirational. But speaking of IRS, we think about taxes. Any surprise taxes? There were concerns in the last round of PPP, whether it was taxable or not, these loans. Any clarity there in this
Yes,
time?
finally, we got clarity on that. A lot of small businesses took out PPP loans and then were surprised when on their taxes, they were told they couldn't deduct the expenses that they had paid with that PPP loan, which essentially made the loan taxable. Congress overturned that IRS ruling. So now the PPP loan is entirely tax-free. By the way, the same thing is true about those EIDL grants I mentioned as well. So now you won't pay taxes on the loan forgiveness that you receive, and you'll be able to deduct the expenses that you pay for with your PPP loan or with your EIDL grant.
And Neil, other interesting changes, if I'm correct. I mean, has the loan amount changed from $2 million or just $10 million, or any changes there?
Yeah, it used to be $10 million maximum loan. That's now been reduced to $2 million. So the total value of the loan, maximum loan, is smaller. Remember, it's the lesser of the $2 million cap, or 2.5 times your monthly payroll costs. And by the way, they're looking back to 2019 for those payroll costs. You can use a more advantageous time. There's some options and safe harbors there, but in general, they're looking back to your 2019 pre-February 15th, pre-2020, pre-pandemic payroll costs, and to calculate that. There's also an exception if you are if you're in the accommodation or the food service industry, your second draw loan is 3.5 times your monthly payroll. So it's a little bit more generous if you happen to be in one of those accommodation or food service industries that have been hard hit.
You know, speaking of specific industries, there's some interesting opportunities here for live venues. And tell us about that. What exactly does that include?
Yeah, so this is a brand new grant program. It's going to be administered by the Small Business Administration. And if you are a live venue operator, so you have a hall and you put on rock concerts or live musical performances, you have an independent movie theater, you have a theater production company. And so the idea is that it's performance oriented. There is a new grant program that you can qualify for up to $10 million. Now, you can't get both the PPP and this live venue grant, so you have to choose between the two of them. But if you happen to qualify for this, you can get a grant of up to $10 million or 45% of your 2019 gross earned receipts. Now, lots of people are immediately trying to figure out, well, we have live performance. Am I a live venue operator? The law is pretty detailed as to who qualifies. So it has to be, you can't be an event space who occasionally lets people put on free performances, for example. You have to earn money by charging tickets. You have to have all the theater production things that you would normally have for promoting events. It's really designed for those, comedy clubs, music show venues that have just never been able to reopen.
A lot of Black-owned and other minority businesses are sole proprietors, 1099s. Anything that we should be aware of in this conversation? For those
Yes. Remember,
self-employed, all of that.
Remember, if you are self-employed, if you are an independent contractor, you qualify for the PPP program, both the first round PPP and the second draw PPP. So, if you're one of those self-employed individuals, your business has been hurt, you meet the other, you still have to meet the other qualifications. Obviously, you meet the number of employees, but you have to have the revenue reduction, et cetera. You qualify for that. The same is true of EIDL grants too. So, for example, if you are a self-employed individual in a new market tax credit neighborhood, one of the first things I would be looking at, and you've had a small reduction in revenue, one of the first things I'd be looking at is applying for one of those EIDL grants, because that's $10,000 that is targeted to you and to other small employers will be immediately available once the program's reopen through the SBA.
There's another interesting sort of change here, which you guys probably have some minority business organizations and chambers a part of this forum. Anything different on nonprofit status, 501(c)(3) versus 501(c)(6)?
Yeah, if you remember, the original PPP program was only available for nonprofits that were 501(c)(3)s. So if you were a chamber of commerce, a destination marketing organization, if you were a trade association, you didn't qualify because normally you're a 501(c)(6) organization. The program has now been expanded, PPP, to include 501(c)(6)s. There are some limits, smaller limits on the size and number of employees, some lobbying restrictions, but in general, 501(c)(6)s are now eligible to apply for the PPP program.
And Neil, we kind of use the terminology forgiveness, exhaustion of the first loan. If I've not exhausted my first loan from the first round, am I eligible to apply?
Well, you have to have exhausted the proceeds from it. Now, so exhausted is different than forgiven, right? You don't have to get forgiveness, but you do have to have used all of the proceeds by the time you receive that second loan. And so for a lot of small businesses, they've already used up all those proceeds. Maybe some aren't, but they know they're going to, let's say in the next couple of weeks, they should go ahead and get prepared. Now, let me just put a small asterisk on this. We're basing this off of the way the law reads. And as all of us remember from the first time with the PPP program, sometimes the SBA and the Treasury Department issue regulations that kind of stretch the law or impose new restrictions or take it in a different way. And so we're all very anxious to read the new SBA guidance for this program. But based on the law, that's our belief, is that you simply have to use up the funds by the time your new loan is dispersed.
And obviously during the pandemic, what happens if I've upgraded my business? I've added plexiglass, and what kind of other expenses are covered as a part?
So before your PPP loan, for forgiveness purposes, you could use it for payroll, for rent, for utilities, mortgage interest payments. But that was about it. They added 4 new categories of eligible expenses. One of those is exactly what you just described: capital expenditures or other expenditures you've made for public health measures. So the plexiglass, the dividers, rearranging the office, creating a drive-through, and all of those things, those are eligible expenses now. A lot of businesses have had to acquire software and accounting services because you got to keep all the separate track of those. Those business operation expenses now are included. Certain supplier costs that you might have, supplier costs for contracts that you entered into before you got your PPP loan, or for perishable goods, even for contracts or purchase orders after you receive your loan, you can use those as well. However, I just want to caution folks that the 60-40 rule still applies. What the 60-40 rule says is that at least 60% of your forgivable loan had to be used for payroll expenses. So let's just make this easy. If you got a $100 loan, but you only spent $50 on payroll expenses, you won't receive full loan forgiveness because you haven't hit that $60 threshold. And so there's about $10 of your loan that simply just won't be forgiven.
Got it. Yeah, one of the questions in the Q&A box here: what documentation will be required to certify and demonstrate that I've had a 20-25% reduction in receipts?
We don't know is the short answer. This is one of the things that we're waiting on guidance and the application form from the SBA. And just to remind folks how this is going to work, the SBA will issue guidance. They will issue loan application forms. So everyone who applies for a loan will be using the same form, but you're still going to go to your private lender. So that CDFI, that community bank, that credit union, a online lender. Many of those are also participating in the program. So you have to go to them. You work on them. You work with them on your application. You submit it to them, and then they submit it to the SBA. And so, one of the things people often ask is, what should I be doing today? Well, the thing I would be doing today is figuring out, do I think I qualify for this? And if I think I do qualify and I want to take advantage of this, I'd be the PPP program, first or second draw, I'd be calling my lender. If I don't have a lender I normally work with who participates in the program, I'd be searching for a lender who does participate. If I have a CDFI in my neighborhood, I'd be going to that CDFI and talking to them. How do I work with you to submit this application? Now, you're not going to be able to submit the application today. You won't be able to do that until the SBA opens up the program. But get a head start. Get with them, know exactly who you're going to talk to, who you're going to work with to file that loan application. That's the best thing you can do today to get ready to take advantage of this Paycheck Protection Program.
Neil, there are a number of questions regarding can I apply for both programs? If I already obtained an EIDL loan, can I apply for a second loan? I mean, are there any rules around how many times I can apply, or can I apply for both at the same time simultaneously, or
So there's a reason there's questions, because the rules have changed. Congress changed its mind again. In this case, I think they've changed their mind in a way that's actually favorable for small businesses. So you can receive both an EIDL loan and a PPP. You can take both a PPP and an employee retention tax credit. You can get the employee retention tax credit and an EIDL loan. The one thing you really can't do at the moment is take the live venue grant and a PPP loan. Now, I do want to caution folks about something. You can't take the employee retention tax credit and get a forgivable PPP loan for the same expenses. So let's just imagine, an employer has 3 employees. They get a PPP loan. They're using that to pay their employees, and they take the employee retention tax credit. You can't get $2 from the government for the $1 that you paid your employees, right? So instead, what you have to do is you have to figure out how to time this, right? So you're going to say, maybe I'll take the PPP loan and I want to get that forgiven. And so I'm going to use that for January, February, and March. But then I know my PPP loan is going to be exhausted. So then I'm going to turn to the employee retention tax credit and use the employee retention tax credit for April, May, and June. And that is entirely appropriate under the new law. And so, one thing I would caution people is, even if you select one program, plan out how you might want to utilize all of them in a way that can help your business.
Back to the chat here. Is there any requirement or stipulation that you use the same bank as the first PPP?
No. It may be, no, there's not. And so, I think you'd want to think through, you got a better lender, better opportunities, but also remember that, the first lender it may be easier because a lot of the information is going to be the same.
Let's see here from Carl. If I received a first PPP loan based off my 2019 payroll monthly average, can you use that average payroll cost from 2020 to determine the size of your second PPP loan?
Yeah, generally, most people will want to go back to 2019 because you probably have more employees and higher payrolls. But there are going to be some options to choose alternative periods on which to base your loan. So that's one of the issues where when we get the loan application, we'll see some of those alternative periods that you may be able to avail yourself of.
And then, one question is interesting. I know I'm coming back to the word exhaustion, which I think we all are exhausted.
I was going to say, I'm pretty exhausted.
We got to keep fighting forward. But if a company did not, but in terms of exhaustion, how do you document? What documents would you need to show that you exhausted the first loan?
Yeah, this is very similar to the 25% revenue reduction. We don't know. That's something that we're looking for from SBA in terms of the guidance. My hope, and frankly, a little bit of my expectation is that that's not going to be entirely stringent, that it's going to be, pretty much, do you attest that you've already used the funds you've already received? And I would just stress to folks too, everyone, and appropriately so, have been focused on a PPP loan and getting the PPP loan forgiven, because obviously having no debt is better than carrying a bank loan. But there may be instances where you look at it and you say, I might not hit that 60% threshold, or that might not make the most sense for my business. And it's still pretty generous loan terms for the PPP. Yeah, you'll have to pay it back, but you'll have up to 5 years to pay it back. It's pretty low interest rate. And so, we've talked to some small businesses who are just making the decision that they're not going to focus everything on loan forgiveness. They're going to focus on maintaining their business and just know that they're going to have to pay that loan back.
Got it. I know we're waiting on a lot of guidance still from SBA, but one of the questions here, the SBA EIDL original loan portal is still open from the original loan. Do I need to wait to apply for the new round of funding to get the $10,000 grant, or can I apply now?
I last checked yesterday evening, so maybe it's changed today. So with that caveat, the EIDL grant wasn't open, but the EIDL loan. So you might, if I were in that situation and I was going ahead and proceeding with an EIDL loan, I was well on my way, I might then come back to do the EIDL grant. But if I haven't started the loan, I suspect the grant program will be open soon, and being able to take advantage of that. Remember, one of the things about the EIDL grant is you can receive the grant and decline the loan.
Got it. What if I started my company in 2020? I mean, I can't look back, obviously, 2019.
Yeah, so the PPP program is really tied into businesses that were in existence as of February 15th, 2020. So it's really hard to take advantage of that. The EIDL program is obviously more flexible and more open. There are different rules for the employee retention tax credit if you just came into an existence, and you may be able to depend on when you started, you may be able to take advantage of that, and you'll just have to use alternative periods for calculating your revenue reduction. But I should also remind people, don't forget about the SBA's regular lending programs. So in addition to the fact that they have those regular lending programs that exist, one of the provisions in this bill is that there's basically 6 months, up to 6 months of forbearance on payments. It's actually not, forbearance is the wrong word. It's actually up to 6 months where the government will make your monthly payments for you on existing or new loans. And so that may be a huge opportunity to take advantage of those existing loan programs and be able to not have to make any payments, for several months.
A question here from Cassandra: if we've since reduced our staff and are seeking to restore, but that's kind of what the intent is, right? I mean,
that's right. And remember, yep, you're exactly right, Rick. And remember, if you've reduced your headcount during, essentially the March, April, May timeframe, you have to restore that headcount, or you risk losing some of your loan forgiveness. Now, there's some safe harbors there. You're going to have essentially through March of this year to restore that headcount. You can also get essentially a waiver from the restoration if business conditions don't allow you to restore that headcount, or if you can't find qualified workers to fill the slots that you used to have. So the general intent is for you to bring back workers that were in your employ kind of pre-pandemic. But if for some reason that's not possible, you'll want to look at the safe harbors. And so, one of the things that we have at uschamber.com is some of the guides. We're in the process of updating them right now to reflect the second draw PPP and the changes to the employee retention tax credit. But you can look at our PPP loan forgiveness guide, for example, to get a sense of what some of those safe harbors are, and then just check back over the next few days as we update those guides to reflect the new law.
And Neil, on the head count, is the guidance very specific? How do you define head count? Is it FTE? Is it just literally counting number of employees? I mean, is there any kind
of on the PP again? Consistency is not sometimes Congress's strong suit, so it varies from program to program. This is most important for the PPP program, and in PPP, it is just a straight number of employees. They don't use FTE, so it is, whether you're part-time, full-time, doesn't really matter. That's an employee.
And the issue of it advancing the tax credit. Can you explain that a little more, how that works? We're going to a number of questions on how that actually works.
Yeah. So again, this is through the IRS. So remember, as an employer, one of the things that you do is that you withhold and remit payroll taxes to the Treasury on behalf of your employees. The payroll taxes that fund Social Security. These are your FICA taxes. This is a tax credit that applies against that withholding. So if you have $100 of withholding and you get a $50 tax credit, you basically only have to remit $50. But if you have $100 in taxes you're supposed to remit, but you have $200 worth of credits, the government sends you a $100 check. That's the refundable portion of it. So you both get to avoid paying the $100, keep it, and get another $100 from the government. In addition, because we know that managing cash can be a challenge, one of the things that you can do is apply for an advance on that tax credit. And if you go to the IRS, just go to Google, IRS Employee Retention Tax Credit. There are the forms there. Again, you're going to want to work with your tax preparer, your bookkeeper, whoever it is that's, or if it's you yourself, however you're managing those. I know a lot of small businesses, they use payroll processors. So payroll processors can also help you take advantage of this tax credit. And I've talked to several of them. They're gearing up for these changes to be able to serve their members as well, their customers.
Got it. Question from Thomas here. For companies, for comparison rather, of 2019 and 2020 quarters, can we consider any quarter for both years or specific quarters? For example,
Any quarter. Third to third, second to second, first to first, fourth to fourth.
Got it. And, as we kind of wrap up this part of the conversation, what are 2, 3, 4 things that businesses should be thinking about right now because some of this, particularly for first time participants in the program, may be a bit overwhelming. But what do you advise? How should they be thinking about these various pathways for funding and support, whether it's EIDL, PPP, or tax credit? What should they be doing today?
Yeah, so I think the first step is to make a game plan for how you want to tackle this, right? So first, a lot of people try to say they want to work out every T and every I of whether they're absolutely eligible. There are lots of parameters on this. I would take a look, based on the information that's already out there, and say, do I think I'm probably eligible for this? And if I think I'm eligible for this and I want to take advantage of it, then I'd say, who do I go to? What's the point of entry for this program? And so if it's an EIDL, I know it's the SBA. If it's the PPP loan, first or second time loan, I know it's a lender. If it is the employee retention tax credit, I know I'm going to whoever prepares and remits my taxes. And so I would make the game plan to go to them and say, I want to take advantage of the employee retention tax. I want to get a second PPP loan. I want to go to the SBA and apply for an EIDL grant. And then once I figure out that that's my point of contact, I begin pulling together the information I know I'm going to need for that application. Obviously, lenders can help you with that. The applications that already exist online for the first PPP program, SBA.gov or Treasury.gov to get those. You can take a look at those and you can take advantage of that. And so the forms for the employee retention tax credit, they're obviously going to be updated, but those original forms are there. And I would just start going down that road.
And Neil, can you reference again the U.S. Chamber resources? You talked about SBA because I know we have guides and to help navigate a lot of this because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, so uschamber.com, we have guides to a lot of these programs. As I mentioned, we're in the process of updating them. They'll be updated to reflect the new law and the new guidance that comes out from SBA and the IRS, but it'll give you a sense of the things that you're going to need to get started. Obviously, the actual applications, the actual forms that you fill out, those come from the government. But this will help you in that process of kind of getting started and help you kind of begin to answer some of those basic questions. Obviously, you want to be able to go in to whether it's your lender or your tax preparer with some sense of, okay, this is how it's going to work and here's how I want to take advantage of it. And I was just talking yesterday evening with a lot of the folks in the banking community. They're waiting like we are for the guidance, but they're gearing up. They're going to be ready to go. They're going to be ready to help. And so the one thing I would say is, if you're thinking about PPP and you don't have a lender relationship right now with a lender who's participated in the program, go find a lender who you can work with to make this application. Because without a lender, you're not going to be able to make that application. So if it's not the bank that you traditionally bank with, if you don't have a traditional, go find a lender, because that's going to be the bottleneck. And if you don't overcome that bottleneck, you'll never be able to take advantage of the program.
Right. Neil, let me again thank you for spending time with our partner organization, NMSDC, and having this conversation with small and minority businesses across the country. It reaffirms our work in advancing equality of opportunity across so many sectors in our society. And front and center is growing and expanding opportunities for small and minority businesses in the United States. So thank you so much for joining us and taking time.
Well, Rick, thanks for having me. Thanks for everything you and the folks at NMSDC do. It really is valuable to helping businesses, and I'm honored to be with you today.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm delighted to bring up our next panel, the moderator of the next panel, Carlton O'Neill, who's president of Lightspeed EDU Incorporated and National MBE Input Committee Chair. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Carlton.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate those comments and for that very enlightening session. There was a lot of information that was shared, and we will pick up and continue during this banking session. So for those of you who may not have been with us at the very beginning, let me just share with you who will be with us for the remainder of the afternoon. We have Henry Childs, Board Chair, the Business Consortium Fund, known as the BCF. We have Christopher Hollins, Managing Director, GM of Cash Management and Business Banking for JP Morgan Chase. We have Cara Wallace, President of MBE Capital, and Dominic Nyartan, President and Chief Executive Officer at Optus Bank. So, folks, one of the things that I've been thinking about, or I was thinking about in preparation for this session, is that we have been hearing a lot about the minority businesses who have closed, and I know that Rick even mentioned that about 66% of businesses are thinking about permanently having to close as a result of the pandemic. But one thing that I've been realizing is that there isn't a lot of talk about the MBEs who have survived and who are surviving through this time. And I really think that, or I encourage those who are out there and being resilient, innovative, they're pivoting, doing all sorts of things to make it through this tough times, give yourself some credit for doing so. Starting a business is one thing. Maintaining a business and keeping it open for the long term is a totally different story. So I encourage everybody, if you're out there, hang in there, better times are coming, and give yourself some credit for doing so. So with that, let's just jump right into the deep end of the pool here. One of the points that Neil touched upon in a couple of different ways is so important that I want to give each of our panelists a chance to address that point. And that point is, from your perspective as a banker or a finance professional, what actions should MBEs take immediately to be prepared for the next round of PPP? So let's start with Henry Childs. Henry, what are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Carlton, for having me. I think Neil covered it pretty well, the technical stuff, but the truth is we just live in a different economy than we were pre-COVID. So the number one tip I would give all minority businesses is you've got to figure out how to become some sort of digital business. We've seen the companies that have survived. You just mentioned some people who have, survived. Some people are actually receiving record profits. It's because they've been able to transition to the digital economy. So if you were, if you're a minority business and you don't have a way to serve your customers digitally, if you don't have a good way to communicate with your employees remotely, if you don't have, a way to get your products out there, you can get all the PPP you want, you can get all the idle loan you want, you're going to have struggle maintaining and growing your business. So the number one advice I would have right now is bunker down and be like, hey, what does this new economy mean for my business?
Thank you, Henry. Some really good practical thoughts there. Let's continue. Christopher, what are your thoughts on this? What should MBEs do immediately to be prepared?
I'm going to probably limit it to two things because I think Henry's points are spot on. You have to be prepared. At this point, I recognize we're 9 months going into 10 months in the pandemic. If you thought that you could get by through the first round of PPP, have a kind of a light touch on your financials and how to make your business liquid, you're overdue to do the deep dive. At this point, if you're going to be able to pivot, you need to understand what your present position is and not only understand that, recognize what is your opportunity to pivot. So that would be my first piece. The second piece, I think, gets to points that have also been made. You need to know who are going to be your clients, your customers on a go-forward basis. If you are a restaurant that's in the middle of a downtown area where there used to be primarily office workers, by this time you should have already figured out if you have a delivery model that is available to you. Are there other clients that you can engage with, even some of the ones that have already been basically your patrons? How do you get to them at home? So without those two things, it's going to be very difficult to survive. And the final point that I'm going to amplify that Henry just gave, if you're not digital at this point, then you need to triple down on getting digital, because you need to have more ways to engage clients that you don't yet know in order to be able to expand your business.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm hearing get digital and know your customers so far. Cara, what about you? Let's hear some of your thoughts for the MBEs who need to do something immediately. What should they be thinking about?
I would say take advantage of these government programs. Take the time to learn, get information, and take advantage. At MBE, we are an approved SBA non-bank lender. PPP round one, we processed over 13,000 loans to the tune of $300 million. We did this because we originally had the assistance of Magic Johnson and Eric Holloman, who put up over $100 million from Equitrust. And we were able to start lending. And we lent to primarily, probably close to 90% were minority and women-owned businesses. I'm going to tell you, the application probably won't be that much different than the first time. We're probably going to open up our online portal to probably tomorrow evening to start taking in these applications, getting them ready, processed, so that when the SBA opens up, hopefully next week, we will process these loans and fund them in 5 days. We know how important it is to service minority-owned businesses. Rafael Martinez started this company 21 years ago, lending to minority and women-owned businesses. Last year, it was to the tune of $1.7 billion. So we're going to keep doing it. So take advantage of PPP, EIDL, and anything else that's out there.
Excellent, thank you. And I can tell you that I have heard, or I've spoken to MBEs who have said, well, I'm not going to really go after it. But from what you're saying, go for it. The money's there, go for it. And organizations like yours, we're glad that you're out there helping out. And Dominic, what are your thoughts on what MBEs should do immediately?
Thank you, Carlton. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you for this opportunity. So just to put it in context, Optus Bank is one of 18 African-American banks in the country. We're also a certified CDFI. In the last round of PPP, we did 40.5 million in PPP loans. And keep in mind, our entire bank was about 90 million in size. So we really jumped out there. And the reason we jumped out there is because we knew that minority businesses were going to be really left out in a significant way. Because of the systemic challenges that they've had accessing banking and financial relationships. So we really jumped out there. Our bank today is almost 200 million in assets, in great part due to the growth that we experienced through the PPP program. But what we advise all of the customers that came to us, and even those that were reaching out, is start early, build a relationship with a financial institution you can trust. CARA's organization has done a fantastic job. Find an organization that is going to be responsive to your needs. So you're not just a number. You're not just one of millions of people that are seeking support and credit. Find someone that you can call on, that you can have a relationship with, because we know minority businesses are on the front lines of this pandemic. They're more impacted. They're more stressed. They have less resources. They don't have fancy lawyers and accountants to do these applications for them. So you need someone who is going to hold your hand, help you, and apply what I call the 6 C's of lending. And that 6 C is compassion. It cannot be just a numerical transaction. It has to be someone who deeply cares about this minority business that is trying to survive and thrive.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm taking from what you're saying, start early, build a relationship, work with someone who is going to work with you. Excellent. Really good thoughts. Okay, so let's move on. Kind of along the same vein, Christopher, I want to return to you with a question because we've heard that the lack of the banking relationship was one of the reasons the New York Federal Reserve Bank cited for disparities in PPP loan approvals to Blacks and white-owned companies. What needs to be done to help minorities improve their banking relationship?
So thank you for the question. And we have seen at Chase that that's absolutely the case. And through efforts that we have actually implemented over the last year and a half, even prior to the pandemic, we have been more intentional in minority communities in order to ensure that you're building those relationships. As has already been stated, without that relationship, it makes it difficult for the bank or anyone, quite frankly, to have that compassion to do the extra due diligence, the extra work on your behalf to help you find avenues for access to capital. So specifically, we're letting people know. In fact, we've done a lot of data analytics within Chase to be able to look at our small business customers and make certain that they are constantly knowledgeable of the availability of PPP lending and other lending sources within Chase. As you and many of the folks participating today may also know, you can only, for the larger banks, unless you already have a relationship, PPP is not something that you would find yourself available to. So having a relationship with the bank is going to be super important. We're continuously updating our websites, actually almost on a daily basis, to make sure our customers are informed of what's changing. So many of the changes that were discussed about 20 minutes ago, though it's to the extent that they've come out from the SBA, will be available on our website at chase.com. And then we're doing a lot more, as I described earlier, through a program called Minority Entrepreneurs in a number of cities to be more proactive with the type of advice and support that allows for small businesses to make good decisions and to make themselves prepared for anything that may happen, regarding access to capital.
All right, thank you. So again, the key there is still the relationship. Start to build it and move it forward. All right, so let's move along here. We have a lot of questions that are coming in. I'll pick up this one for Kara. Since demographic information is not collected as part of the PPP process, aside from the option to select tribal businesses, there were few tools to measure or enforce how well the PPP supported these minority communities. How can this problem be remedied? Kara, what are your thoughts there?
So that's a tough one because we know of the historical discrimination by the big banks of our community, except for Chase. But as I say that, we could collect the information after, and quite frankly, with everyone that you do approve, you have to see a driver's license if they don't have an existing relationship. So we are seeing, and again, we have data, we have demographics from the zip codes, so we know the communities we're in. So there's ways to get to that data. And what I would say to the SBA is to collect the information on the back end. When individuals sign their prom note, we could at that point collect that information and it wouldn't be an issue.
All right, thank you. That's a really good tip. I'm going to make a note of that for some of our additional conversations with our governmental partners. Dominic, I want to shift just a little bit and ask you about the set-aside package and the dollars that are available, because the new package sets aside $15 billion for small community banks and small credit unions, as well as an additional $15 billion for mission-based community lenders, such as community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions, and SBA microloan intermediaries. All of these institutions, we all know, provide critical grants and loans for minority-owned businesses and other companies in disadvantaged areas. But the key question is $15 billion enough? What are your thoughts, Dominic?
Carlton, thank you. So I'll put this in the context of us fitting in multiple of those boxes you mentioned. We're CDFI, we're a minority bank, we're African American owned bank. We're also a small community-based lender. And I will tell you without a hesitation, 15 billion is not enough. You cannot reverse 400 years of systemic disparities carefully constructed to prevent people from accessing credit with a $15 billion PPP advantage. But it's a great start. It's a wonderful start. And like many of my esteemed colleagues, you pointed out, we have to take advantage of that. And we cannot let these businesses be in the back of the bus. We need to put them in the front of the line to be right there when this portal opens. I'm so excited to hear what Kara's saying. They're ready to open. We're also opening up our portal, trying to keep it electronic, streamlined. But I think it is a great start, but the key is response time and be able to capture that moment, because having that set aside or that advantage for us as a minority owned bank, it's not going to do anything if we are not able to deliver. So the key is response time, and some of these businesses we've learned from the previous one, a week makes a huge difference. We can getting access to that paycheck. Many of them run out of money last week. So an extra week could be the final straw that prevents them from recovering and growing. So I hope this is a good beginning. I hope this key program is a down payment on reversing those disadvantages for our businesses that we want to make sure not just make it through the pandemic, but then are able to thrive and help close the gap, the wealth gap that we see today.
All right, thank you for that. I had a feeling that you were going to say that 15 billion wasn't enough, and I totally agree with that. And thank you for the additional perspective on it, especially the comment about response time. So I'm going to do
Carlton,
another.
can I add something here?
Sure,
Not necessarily
sure.
to Dominic's comment, but to Kara's. The CFPB is also working on a rule for collecting sensitive demographic information. And while the timing may not exactly line up, that is something that we are pushing as well as other banks, because you need to be able to actually get a demographic cut of this if you're going to make the improvements that Dominic is talking about, to actually push for more than $15 billion to be able to get that into its proper geographic areas. So there is, while it's not going to fix things today, I just want this population to understand that we are collectively trying to figure out ways of being more intentional around getting information that allows us to make better decisions and to lobby for greater government input into providing access to capital.
Excellent. Thank you for chiming in with that, Christopher. And actually, while you're on screen, that brings to mind something else that I've been thinking about, and it's similar to a question that came in. What are some other key lessons that were learned by financial institutions during the first round of PPP that are being applied to the second round to ensure more minorities and small businesses get funded this time?
So I'm going to relate that to my last comment, in that having that demographic information would have been extraordinarily important for a couple of reasons. One, when you think about how businesses are operating, where they're operating, having that overlay to the PPP program would have not allowed for us to overlook a significant portion of the population. We could have done the direct reach out and gotten people involved and said, look, we may not be your bank today, but we want to make sure you know that this is available to you. If you don't have a banking relationship, we're here to try to help you have one, whether that's with us or with someone else. That would have made a huge difference. And then I think, secondly, having a little bit more advanced warning about PPP would have allowed us to have kind of seminars like we're having here. So 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance, we're letting people know that this is coming so that they can be appropriately prepared. One of the things that we saw is that businesses that, whether they're well-heeled or just super disciplined financially, if they have an accountant, they have a finance organization, they can pull together this information basically in a few hours. For many sole proprietors, small businesses, regardless of whether they're a minority or not, that could take a week or more. And to Dominic's earlier point, if you missed out on a week, you missed out on almost half the first PPP outlay. So those would be the two things I would probably say are lessons learned.
And
All right.
Carlton, if I could add to that, having processed so many loans, what I would tell people, number one, ensure that these sole proprietors and independent contractors know that they can apply. We probably did over 7,000 of them to the self-employed. And what's important for them to know is they do need to file a 1040C. And we look at line 31. So those that take out too many expenses and lower that number, it actually impacts them. But understand, individual sole proprietors can get up to $20,833 if they pay themselves $100,000 or more a year, because that's 2.5 times monthly, 8,300. So it is so critical. And for so many of these minority-owned businesses who have these 1099 employees, they can't get the PPP for those 1099. So it's important that they encourage them to apply and get it. And again, we are doing we take all of them and try to be as helpful as possible so people can apply online at mbeppp.com, and we will try to support as many as we can.
All right, thank you. Henry, let's bring you back in on that same point. I would love to get everyone's perspective on this about lessons learned.
Yeah, and I'm going to be the contrarian, and I think anybody that's ever heard me knows, because we've been talking about a lot of the banking stuff. So I'm going to be the voice of minority businesses on this one. Lesson learned is policy matters. I think everybody, on this webinar knows that we're pretty good at cleaning up stuff after the bill is passed. But we need to get on the front end of some of this bill passing. For instance, Neil did a really great job of talking about the purpose of the PPP. And the first thing you hear is this payroll protection. Well, if you know any data about minority businesses, Black and especially Black and Latinx businesses, over 90% don't even have a single employee. So you're missing out immediately on the heart and soul of the PPP when you hear that. The second thing that we know is we tell people, just go to your bank like it's, just easy. Well, we know 1 in 4 Black businesses that have employees don't have a banking relationship. They don't have a borrowing history with their banking. And it's 1 in 10 for non-employer Black firms. And we can get, in the weeds of why. We know there's historical, discrimination. We know this other stuff. But the fact of the matter is, this is just the data. So it would have made a lot more sense. And this is what I fought for when I was actually, running NBDA. And one of the things that NMSDC did a great job of is questioning, why are we making businesses go to a bank to get loans so they don't have to lay off employees? If you look at what a lot of other countries did, they give the money directly to the businesses. There wasn't any of this application stuff. So my number one thing would be policy matters. We have to find a way that we have all these great minority serving organizations, whether it be financial, whether it be organizations like NMSDC, that are lobbying Congress so that the needs of our constituency are best understood. So when these laws come out, we're not scrambling at the late hour trying to fix stuff.
All right, thank you. Policy matters. And Dominic, what about you? Let's hear some of your thoughts on key lessons learned by financial institutions in the first round.
Well, I'll try to add something of value, since what Henry just mentioned is very resonant with me. Even though I'm a banker, I still appreciate the perspective. The money needs to go quickly and needs to be responsive, not run through channels of bureaucracy. But unfortunately, it is what we have to some extent. So what I would say the big lesson learned for us was the businesses we serve, which is the vast majority of our PPP loans went to minority businesses, and our average loan size dropped below $20,000 in the second part of the first round. So we serve the most vulnerable, the smallest, the sole proprietors. They don't have accountants. They don't have the support, the infrastructure to do that. And we really needed more time. And what we were begging the policymakers is to give us more time, because if you have 10 days to fund the loan, from the time the borrower submits your completed package, frequently that package is not completed. and to provide the sufficient technical assistance and not be forced into making the decisions as a lending institution with a mission to make a decision. Do I help this one person and forego helping 10 others because I'm spending 10 hours on this $5,000 PPP loan when I could do 10 others in the same time? We don't want to have to make those decisions. But unfortunately, the clock that was put on these loans forced us to make some of those decisions. And so what I think the policymakers need to understand, the businesses that are at the front lines, the Main Street businesses, the businesses that are truly the backbone of the economic miracle we have experienced in so many ways in the United States for a long time now. We're now seeing cracks in that miracle because we forgot about the businesses that built the Main Street. And so if we don't give them more time, provide more resources, but allow us to truly do the work that we need to make them successful, again, the natural driver is going to be, let's do the $500, $600 million loans to businesses with CPAs, with CFOs, with controllers, because they send us a nice package that we can quickly underwrite and move on. So we need more time. We also need more resources. To do a $10,000 PPP loan, we averaged about 9 to 10 hours. It was about half that for a $500,000 loan. Again, because that borrower comes with the infrastructure of someone with significant payroll. So we need more time. And also the incentive system was set such that a lot of large institutions and small institutions were drawn to serve the easy to serve customers, not the most vulnerable.
And thank you, Dominic. I mean, wonderfully practical information again, not only for the MBE and the small business community, but also for our policymakers. So thank you. Now let's open up for some additional questions here. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'll direct a few and I ask the panelists to jump in and chime in as you'd like. The first one though, I'll direct to you, Christopher. The question is, I wasn't able to get a first round PPP loan. Should I even try for one in the second round? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. There's no rationale not to do that. At this point, whether it was because you didn't have the relationship at the time, you didn't have enough time, we're now trying to let everyone know there is time to get prepared. And so you need to get in on this second half. The focus of it is for smaller businesses. So there is at least a recognition that the entire PPP program was not adjusted appropriately to who it really needed to serve. So this is your opportunity to take advantage of that. And if you don't have a relationship with a bank or with a financial institution, start with one. Like at this point, we can all do it for you and would be more than happy to do so. But you have to let us know that you need our help.
All right, thank you. Cara, please jump in on that same question and I'll have another one to follow up to the one that just popped up that I think applies right now.
Yeah. So I think that everybody out there should apply for a PPP. And again, we did loans as low as $1,000 because we realize that that has an impact for some sole proprietors. So it's important to jump on it. And again, it's not that difficult. The SBA and the legislators, actually, folks like Congressman Espaillat, they worked hard to make it as easy as possible. When you look at the form, what it takes to fill out the application, very easy. And for sole proprietors, it's by now you have filed your 1040C. All we do when we look at it, we're verifying that you are you, that you have a business, and we're looking at line 31 of that 1040C, and we're going to see that what your monthly payroll is, multiply that times 2.5, and that's the loan you're eligible. Our online technology processes that immediately directly with the SBA e-trans, and you are approved. And after you're approved, we send you a prom note online instantly. And within 5 days, we can fund that loan. who wouldn't take advantage of that? And by the way, it's 1%, everybody, over 5 years. If anybody finances their business with a credit card, you are paying 18 to 20 something percent. Why wouldn't you? Even if you got $2,000 and had to pay back $1,000 over 5 years, why wouldn't you?
All right. Nakara, would you just mention again, you're from MBE Capital, just share anything else about MBE Capital, because I've seen a couple of questions pop up saying, who is she with again?
Yeah, so MBE Capital is, we just focus on getting minority and women access to cash as quickly as possible and at as low cost as possible. When we were asked to jump into the PPP after the big banks did not service our communities, we very quickly stood up an online technology and were able to process so many loans. So people can go to www.mbeppp.com. And I just have to give a shout out to Chase because they are our banking partner and they're helping us deliver these ACHs same day, just great technology. And we developed the relationship with Chase through Fred Royal, who is just a great brother that you just love when it all comes together.
Absolutely. I will make sure that he knows that.
All right. Thank you both. Dominic, I have a question that I want to ask you, and it's still along the lines of the PPP, because I think it was Nicole who put a question forward to say, is there any downside to having a first round PPP and then to think about going for a second round? Dominic, what are your thoughts there?
We would encourage everyone, just like my fellow panelists shared, there is no downside. In fact, the application is going to be easier for you. So if you're qualified and you go to the same lender as served you before with a PPP loan, they already have your information. They already have your BSA AML information that's required. They already have information about your business. They know you exist. They've already scrubbed that loan file one time. So to get a second loan, if you had experienced that drop of 25% quarter over quarter, 2019 over 2020, why not do it? It's going to make you very much more likely to succeed in the uncertainty ahead of us if you get the money. And to Kara's point, it's 1% loan. It's not even if you do not qualify for forgiveness for whatever reasons down the road, which I believe we are trying to scrub that question on the front end before we encourage someone to apply. But even if you don't, it's 1% money. So worst case, you repay it with 1% interest. So we would encourage everyone to ask those questions and then also encourage them, go to the same lender if you got served well with a particular lending institution, and challenge them to make it easier for you. Expect them to take care of you better because they've already done it once. So it should be faster, smoother, less taxing on you and your business.
Excellent. So Dominic, while I have you here, I have a related question. The attendee is stating, my application was denied. Do I ask for reconsideration of the original loan, or do I apply as a new applicant?
I don't know what the new guidelines are going to be, so if there are any of my colleagues here who have better information, but I would definitely encourage to find out why the application was denied, and then have those circumstances that caused the denial changed. I can tell you from experience, we denied several applications because we could not document any income for sole proprietors. That line 31 was blank or was zero. So what do you do then? So if it was denied for those reasons, find out if those circumstances have changed so you may qualify now and go pursue it. But I'd love to hear from my colleagues here if they have a different or additional information to share.
That was absolutely our experience, Dominic, when we could not verify income. That was the primary reason why we had to deny the application. So if, it is important that if you were denied, that you get a clear answer as to why that has occurred. From most of our financial institutions, whether you're fully digital or not, we provided some information to those who were denied. So if you were, please contact your financial institution to find out why, to ensure that if you need to reapply, that you're not going through the entire process from the beginning, and that you've tried to make most efficient the use of your time in order to have access to this money.
Hey, Carlton, for another day's discussion, it's unfortunate that a lot of small businesses are taught, hey, when you open up your business, try to put as many expenses as possible on so you're not paying taxes. And unfortunately, for this process, what we did see is somebody could have had $100,000 in revenues, but then you see them, by the time you get to line 31, it's at zero. And when you really do look at some of those 1040Cs, they probably took too much in expenses. But that zero on line 31, the SBA rules say you are automatically not qualified for the loan.
Excellent point, Cara. And definitely a good tip for us to remember for a future webinar, perhaps something on kind of financial management or understanding that balance that
Yes.
Businesses need to maintain.
Yeah, and Carlton, we're actually working with NMSDC and a number of other partners, including the Black Chambers of Commerce, to give this kind of education to small business owners so that they understand by the choices they make what optionality that opens to them and then what it actually closes. So to Cara's point, having a webinar specifically on that is something we would definitely want to participate with you in.
Excellent.
Yeah, and Carlton, before we move on, because we've been talking about a lot of debt, and I understand this is a PPP forum, but a lot of minority businesses. I just don't want this to. It seems like I don't want this to delve into a financial literacy course, and I know a lot of minority businesses, they make decisions because they have to do this, right? I mean, we know the data on minority businesses. Especially Black and Latinx, over 90% of them make $1 million or less in annual revenue, right? So these are people who are living or trying to make rent normally, right? But one of the things I want to mention is we need to be paying more attention to equity. And one thing I'm really proud of working with the NMSDC about is we are going to be having a lot more, funds that are debt and equity to help support these businesses. Because again, PPP, I mean, it's necessary, and yes, please apply, but that's not a long-term strategy. And that's not a business growth strategy. So I think since we have all these great, bankers, in this forum, I think it'd be a missed opportunity if we didn't really think about, recovery, because PPP is basically meant for response. So you don't go out of business, so you stay afloat. But what do you really need to do in 2021 to grow your business? And I'm glad that we have these, powerful banking people on the phone that can talk about real business development strategies.
All right. I'm making a note of that. Thank you, Henry. All right. So I do have to ask a few other questions, or I want to ask a few other questions that have arrived from some of our attendees. Question from Lindsay, and this is for any of our panelists. Do businesses who hire freelancers or independent contractors only qualify for PPP? So Cara, why don't you jump in and get us started?
And that is, do businesses that hire freelancers, most likely they're an LLC, or they're a sole proprietor with employees. And so what we saw a lot of for them, if they pay themselves a salary, again, they can get up to $20,800. And again, that's the SBA limited or put a limit of $100,000 as being the maximum salary. And again, when you take that 2.5 times that monthly 8,300, that's how you get to 20,800. So they could get that for themselves. And again, they should encourage anybody that they're working with or working under them to apply separately for a sole proprietor too.
Okay, and I think that's the key there, because I remember that question from the first round or something similar to that. It's encouraging the freelancers and the independent contractors to go after the PPP themselves.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right.
And again, little slight note, people need to pay themselves. They need to write a check to themselves and really pay themselves salaries.
All right, excellent. And let's see, here's one from Lori, and I'll turn this one towards Dominic. Lori asked, if I applied for the EIDL but never received it, do I need to reapply?
I'm not sure what the next round of EIDL looks like exactly. So if there are folks that have experience with that, but what we would tell our customers, definitely, if you never receive the funds, you definitely should have the right to reapply to apply for the EIDL funds. And also note that the EIDL funds do not preclude you from pursuing a PPP loan. There was a lot of confusion about it. And again, unfortunately, minority businesses, a lot of them got bad information or very late information and didn't pursue these funding sources while other businesses did. So we would encourage them to do that, or reach out to your lender, have them reach out to the SBA. I will give a shout out to the SBA too in this forum. Our local office was fantastic about responding to our inquiries. They were really trying to be helpful. And so always ask. We always took the approach. We ask, we put it in writing, we put it out there, see if we can get some guidance so we don't mislead or misinform our businesses and cause them potential harm.
All right, thank you. So Christopher, Henry, Karen, do either of you have any perspective on that? If I applied for EIDL but never received it, do I need to reapply?
I think Dominic spoke about it well. That would be what I would have suggested to a client that had that experience.
Okay, great. Then I have one more question here, and it's an interesting spin. This is from Daniel. Daniel says, what about small businesses that used the first round and it helped them add employees? Will the second round help us to continue to add to our employee base in any way, thus helping the unemployment rate?
I would answer that. So we're going to use their 2019 financials. So the most of the loans we're making the assumption are probably going to be similar to what they got in round one. Again, as long as they're using the monies for payroll, then that's what's critical, or at least 60% of the monies for payroll, and then the other can cover other expenses. But in terms of, as Henry was alluding to, an equity investment to go out and build your company or start another division, that wasn't the purpose of the payroll protection program. So you just, again, have to kind of nuance that, I'll say.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a lawyer telling anybody how to cook their books, but
yeah.
if there is one reason not to go after a PPP, it's just remember that they may be asking additional questions. So make sure remember the 60-40 rules, and I'm serious about this, and everything else applies, because a lot of, one of the issues is a lot of people, they don't have a CPA, they don't have these people helping them with their books. So make sure, if you don't know the answer, to contact either someone online or work with your local banker, because they are doing a lot of audits on this stuff. So I just want everybody to make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and let me just add to that quickly, that is so true. We are working directly with the DOJ because there were some bad actors out there that definitely were fraudulent, and the SBA, DOJ, the government is going after them. So this is not to be taken lightly.
Not at all. And to that point, Carl, even for small infractions, for small dollars, there is heavy enforcement of this. So people need to be buttoned up and tell the truth. Absolutely.
Excellent. All really good tips and things that people should definitely keep in mind. So as we look to wrap this up, let me just kind of summarize a few things with this whole concept of things to keep in mind. I heard policy matters. Preparation is key. Response time is essential. Relationships are critical. And then we should all keep our long-term strategy and a growth development plan in place. So with that, I'm going to close out this session. We have so many more questions than we can ever get to, but I do need to wrap this up and turn it back over to Adrian for closing comments. Thank you, panelists, for all of your very, very strong answers, your practical recommendations and information that we can all use. So Adrian, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlton, Rick, for moderating the sessions. This has been phenomenal information. I've just been watching the hundreds of questions in the chat and the Q&A. I want to thank you all for participating. And I know we could probably keep this going on until late into the evening, but we do have to stop here. Thanks again, Rick, with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for partnering with NMSDC to bring forth this critical information. And we want to make sure that we continue to bring you key information so that you can get the resources that you need. I appreciate our moderator here, Carlton, and our panelists, Neil, Henry Childs, Chris Hollins, Dominic Madyarton, and Carl Wallace for bringing their insights and expertise to this session. And they did it very quickly. We pulled this together in a very short amount of time. I want to thank them for turning around and getting this information out that's so critically important. And thank you to all of you for spending your time with us here this afternoon. We hope that this information will help you cut through the chatter, through the red tape, and bring some truth and light to your way and help you get the resources and funding that you need. We know that these times are not easy times, and we know that there isn't a playbook for how to get through this, but please remember that we're in this together. NMSDC is focusing on the future, your future, and the future of your business, doing all that we can to help clear the way so that we can all move forward together. I'm asking you to please benchmark nmsdc.org and visit us online and follow us on social media often, as we will continue to provide pertinent information as often as it becomes available. We're actually partnering and working with the incoming administration for SBA and hope to get some of these questions that you've put in the chat answered for you so that we can get information to you, because we know there's still a lot of clarity that needs to be brought forth in terms of how this will work. We're also asking you to tune in next Thursday, January 14th at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, as we present to you information from Chase Banking on the Advancing Black Pathways program, Advancing Black Entrepreneurs Session 2, The Power of Capital, and how to fuel the growth of your business. And if you missed Session 1, Reclaim the Future, how your business can address the challenges of COVID-19, there's still time to watch that session on demand at www.nmsdc.org. And to all of our new attendees who joined us for the first time today, we're so excited that you joined us and hope that you gained valuable knowledge from today's session. I hope you continue to browse around our website, looking at nmsdc.org, following this forum to find out more about our organization, or if we can answer any questions about our organizations or the benefits of becoming a member or certified MBE, please just ask us. I want to thank the NMSDC team who worked tirelessly over the holidays, along with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce staff, to stand up this forum for you in a very quick timeline. So thank you all for sacrificing your time during the holidays to make sure that we are bringing critical information to our MBEs. Thanks again for everyone joining. Please stay safe, be well, and remember, minority business matters.